You think your savings will protect you. You think your job, your pension, your bank balance are shields against collapse. But history has a brutal lesson. When systems fail, paper wealth evaporates overnight. What survives is not what you own, it's what you can do. Every collapse, from Rome to Weimar to Venezuela, tells the same story. The people who made it through weren't the ones with the most money. They were the ones with skills that couldn't be inflated away, knowledge that couldn't be taxed, and abilities that held value when currency became worthless. The question is not whether collapse will come. The question is whether you have anything to offer when it does. The mistake most people make is thinking wealth is a number in an account. It's not. Wealth is the ability to create value when systems stop working. And when money fails, the entire economy doesn't disappear. It transforms. Trade continues. People still need to eat, to build, to heal, to survive. But the medium of exchange shifts from paper to production, from savings to skill. The ones who thrive in that shift are the ones who understood this truth before everyone else did. Let's go back to Weimar Germany. By 1923, the mark was collapsing so fast that restaurants changed prices between courses. A worker's monthly salary couldn't buy a loaf of bread by the time they got home. Life savings evaporated in days. The middle class, which had spent generations accumulating paper wealth, was wiped out. Bank accounts meant nothing. Bonds were worthless. Pensions vanished. And yet, some people survived. Some even prospered. Who were they? The farmers still had food. The blacksmiths still had tools. The mechanics could still fix machines. The doctors could still treat illness. The carpenters could still build. These were not the wealthiest people before the collapse. Many were working class, barely scraping by. But when the mark died, they had something everyone else desperately needed: the ability to produce real value. A farmer with grain could trade for clothes, medicine, labor. A mechanic with skills could fix a broken truck in exchange for food or shelter. A seamstress could mend a coat and be paid in bread or firewood. The pattern was clear. The people holding paper wealth watched it burn. The people holding productive skills watched their value soar. Because when money stops working, economies don't stop, they revert. Trade becomes direct. Value becomes tangible. And the only currency that matters is what you can make, fix, grow, or heal. Fast forward to Venezuela in the 2010s. Inflation destroyed the bolivar. Pensions became jokes. Salaries were worthless by lunchtime. The professional class, doctors and engineers with advanced degrees, found their savings obliterated. But the ones who survived were not the ones with the biggest bank accounts. They were the ones who could provide services others needed. Doctors who could treat patients for payment in food. Engineers who could rig generators or repair water systems. Bakers who could still make bread. Farmers who could grow crops. One Venezuelan doctor told reporters he was paid in eggs, rice, and sometimes gasoline. Not because that's what he wanted, but because that's what held value when currency didn't. His medical degree didn't save him. His ability to heal people did. The piece of paper on the wall meant nothing. The knowledge in his hands meant everything. Zimbabwe in the 2000s repeated the pattern. When the Zimbabwean dollar collapsed, the economy didn't vanish. It transformed. People who could weld, who could fix cars, who could grow food, who could sew, suddenly found themselves in demand, not for dollars, for barter, for trade, for real goods. A mechanic might fix a car in exchange for maize. A tailor might repair clothes in exchange for cooking oil. The skill became the currency. What's striking is how quickly formal qualifications became meaningless. A university degree in finance or marketing meant nothing when the financial system collapsed. But a plumber who could fix a broken pipe, a carpenter who could repair a roof, an electrician who could restore power, these people had leverage. The collapse sorted the economy into two groups: those who could produce real value and those who couldn't. Go further back to post-war Europe. After World War II, economies across the continent were shattered. In Germany, cigarettes became currency. In France, bread and wine. In Italy, anything that could be eaten or used. And in that chaos, the people who survived were the ones with practical skills, not the bankers or the bureaucrats whose paper systems had collapsed, but the cobblers who could repair shoes, the farmers who could grow food, the mechanics who could keep trucks running, the nurses who could treat wounds. The pattern is unbreakable. When monetary systems fail, the economy reverts to the oldest form of trade. I give you something you need, you give me something I need. And in that system, skills are the only real wealth. You can't inflate away the ability to grow food. You can't tax away the knowledge of how to fix a broken engine. You can't debase the skill of healing a wound or building a shelter. But here's the critical distinction. Not all skills are equal in collapse. Some abilities hold value regardless of the system. Others become worthless the moment institutions fail. A corporate manager's skill at scheduling meetings means nothing when there's no corporation. A marketing executive's ability to craft ad campaigns is useless when there are no functional markets. A financial analyst's expertise in derivatives is meaningless when there are no functioning banks. What survives are the skills tied to basic human needs: food, shelter, health, safety, and trade. The closer your skill is to fulfilling a fundamental need, the more valuable it becomes when systems collapse. This is not theory. This is pattern, repeated across every major economic collapse in modern history. Let's break it down. Food production sits at the top. Farmers, gardeners, anyone who can grow crops or raise animals become essential. In Venezuela, urban professionals abandoned their careers to grow vegetables in small plots because food was the only reliable currency. In post-war Germany, city dwellers traveled to the countryside, trading watches and jewelry for potatoes and milk. The ability to produce food is the ultimate hedge against collapse. Next comes skilled trades: plumbers, electricians, carpenters, mechanics, welders. When infrastructure breaks down, which it always does in collapse, these skills become critical. A broken water pipe, a failed generator, a collapsing roof, these are problems that cannot wait, and the people who can solve them hold power. In Soviet-era Russia during economic turmoil, skilled tradespeople operated in a shadow economy, trading services for goods, bypassing the worthless ruble entirely. Medical skills follow: doctors, nurses, dentists, pharmacists, anyone who can treat illness or injury. When healthcare systems collapse or become inaccessible, which happens in every major crisis, medical knowledge becomes one of the most valuable commodities. During the Argentine economic collapse in 2001, doctors were paid in food, goods, or bartered services because the peso was unstable and cash was scarce. Then comes repair and maintenance. The ability to fix things, anything, becomes gold when replacement is impossible. In a collapse, supply chains break. You can't just buy a new washing machine or a new bike or new shoes. If it breaks, it has to be fixed. Cobblers, tailors, repairmen of all kinds suddenly become indispensable. After the fall of the Soviet Union, repair shops flourished because no one could afford to replace anything, and the people who could make old things work again were worth their weight in whatever still had value. Security and protection also rise in importance. When rule of law weakens, which it does when governments fail, the ability to provide safety matters. This doesn't necessarily mean violence. It can mean organization, watchfulness, community defense. But the pattern holds. When institutions crumble, those who can provide security gain leverage. And finally, teaching and knowledge transfer. When systems collapse, formal education often breaks down. But people still need to learn skills to survive. The baker who can teach others to bake, the carpenter who can train apprentices, the farmer who can show neighbors how to grow food. These people become anchors in a community struggling to adapt. Knowledge that can be passed on, especially practical knowledge, becomes a form of wealth that multiplies rather than diminishes when shared. Now contrast this with the skills that collapse alongside the system. Finance and banking expertise becomes nearly worthless when financial systems fail. Legal knowledge loses much of its value when rule of law weakens. Corporate management skills evaporate when corporations dissolve. Marketing and advertising mean nothing when there are no functioning markets or media. These are not useless skills in a functioning system, but they are utterly dependent on that system. When the scaffolding falls, they fall with it. The harsh lesson is this. If your skill depends on institutions, infrastructure, and functioning money to have value, it is fragile. If your skill can create value in the absence of all those things, it is resilient. And the people who survive collapses are the ones whose skills are resilient. But skills alone are not enough. You also need the tools and knowledge to apply them. A carpenter without tools is just someone who knows about wood. A mechanic without wrenches cannot fix engines. A farmer without seeds cannot grow food. This is why in every collapse, physical tools become incredibly valuable. A working bicycle, a set of hand tools, a sewing machine, a generator. These objects become wealth because they enable productive skills. In the Great Depression, people who owned basic tools, who knew how to sharpen a blade or repair a wagon or sew a coat, found work and trade opportunities. The knowledge was useless without the means to apply it. In modern Venezuela, those who had generators, solar panels, or even just hand tools could offer services others couldn't. The skill and the tool together created value. One without the other was incomplete. There's also a social dimension. Skills are not just about individual survival. They are about becoming valuable to a community. In collapse, communities often become more important than institutions. Neighbors trade with neighbors, small networks of trust form. And within those networks, the people who can contribute something essential become anchored, protected, supported. A doctor in a collapsed economy is not just surviving alone. They are valuable to everyone around them, which means the community has an interest in their survival. This is why historical accounts of collapse show that skilled individuals often fared better than isolated wealthy ones. A rich person with gold but no skills becomes a target, someone to rob or exploit. A skilled tradesman with a reputation becomes a resource, someone to protect and trade with. The skill creates social capital that money alone cannot buy. So what does this mean for you, right now, in a world where the financial system still functions, but the patterns of history loom? It means that your real insurance is not in your portfolio. It is in what you know how to do. Ask yourself, if money stopped working tomorrow, what could you offer? What can you grow, fix, build, heal, or teach? If the answer is nothing, you are vulnerable in ways you may not realize. This is not about becoming a prepper hoarding supplies in a bunker. This is about recognizing that skills are wealth that cannot be inflated, taxed, or confiscated. They are portable, resilient, and valuable across any system. Whether the economy thrives or collapses, a person who can do something useful will always have value. A person who can only manage paper wealth is one bad crisis away from irrelevance. The actionable lesson is this: learn skills tied to basic needs. Grow food, even if it's just a small garden. Learn a trade, carpentry, plumbing, electrical work, welding. Develop medical knowledge. Even basic first aid can be life-saving. Master repair. Learn how to fix things rather than replace them. Build physical capability. Strength, endurance, and practical competence matter when systems fail. And gather tools, not as a hoard, but as a means to apply your skills. Second, diversify your abilities. A single skill is good. Multiple complementary skills are better. A farmer who can also repair equipment is more resilient than a farmer who cannot. A carpenter who understands basic plumbing has more flexibility than one who doesn't. The broader your skill base, the more situations you can navigate. Third, embed yourself in a community. Skills in isolation are vulnerable. Skills within a network of mutual support are resilient. Know your neighbors. Trade favors. Build relationships. When systems collapse, these networks often become the new economy, and being known as someone who contributes makes you invaluable. And finally, never assume stability is permanent. Romans in the 1st century thought their empire was eternal. Germans in 1913 thought their economy was solid. Zimbabweans in the 1980s believed independence would bring prosperity. In every case, confidence in the system blinded people to its fragility. The ones who survived were not the most optimistic. They were the ones who prepared as if collapse was possible. History doesn't repeat, but the pattern never changes. When money fails, skills survive. When institutions crumble, production endures. When paper burns, the ability to create real value becomes the only currency that matters. The question is not whether you believe collapse will come. The question is whether you will be one of the many left holding nothing, or one of the few holding something real. If you found this useful, subscribe. The past has more lessons than most people realize.